everybody, and welcome to this week's podcast. My name is Paul Slack. I'm coming to you live from Dallas, Texas, and I have my co-host here with me, Ray Larson, who happens to be in the frozen tundra of Minneapolis, St. Paul. Ray, why don't you let everybody know what we're going to be talking about today?
Well, Paul, you love to remind everybody that it's warmer where you are than where I am. And yes, it is the frozen tundra of St. Paul, Minnesota. It's a balmy 9 degrees here today. This week, we're going to talk about marketing metrics that matter. As a business owner or CEO, I can't tell you how many times in my past I was bombarded with statistics that had nothing to do with how my business was performing and had everything to do about how my employee was performing. So what we're going to do today, and for the next couple of podcasts, we're going to talk to you about how to cut through the clutter and how to concentrate on the essential few metrics that mean the most to you as a business owner. Where I'd like to start is a quick story with one of our customers, Paul and I, that happened this week. And he was emailed a performance report for how a directory listing that he signed up for last year was doing. And naturally, they want him to re-up. So they concocted a totally bogus spreadsheet showing that their directory listing provided 5 times what actually happened in terms of referrals and a bounce rate for their directory that was lower than what the organic traffic that was going into Google. Have you seen this very often, Paul? I was flabbergasted.
Well, you know, that's why having a session on the marketing metrics that matter is so important, because if you don't really know the marketing metrics that do matter for your business, it's really easy for the agency or that employee to give you information that looks important that really is meaningless. And so we do see it from time to time, usually not as flagrant as what we saw this week, where the numbers were quite frankly just a lie in a desire to get our client to re-up in their directory, and we were able to very quickly prove that by just looking at Google Analytics.
Yeah, I don't see that very often. I thought it was pretty bold, but I always talk to you about this analytics guru that I follow his blog, and I've read his books. His name is Avinash Kauhik, and he is the Google Analytics. He is the analytics evangelist. He's a public speaker and author, and he's really good about distilling down something that could be very, very complicated into what he calls a select few metrics. But basically, what Avinash proposes is that you need to look at strictly, you have to be kind of myopic. Analytics is this great big tool, and there's a ton of information there, but as a business owner, you need to be myopic about the things that are existential to your business. What are the metrics that tell you how healthy your business is? And then he proposes that everybody in the organization needs to know what they are. You've heard of Kauhik before, Paul, and this kind of philosophy about distilling everything down to a select few, as he calls it?
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes down to it, we can all suffer from what we call analysis paralysis, because quite frankly, there is so much that you can measure. And when you think about internet marketing, even so much more than you can measure than other traditional types of marketing, because everything is so trackable. And so given the fact that we have this mountain of information available to us, it really is critical that you do get a little myopic and find out what are those core things that really are the drivers of your marketing campaigns online, so that you really pay attention to those, and as we'll talk about a little bit later on, manage by exception and really focus in when those key metrics aren't hitting where you hope that they would, going in and really asking yourselves the difficult question, why and how do we fix that?
As long as I've known you, you're a process guy, and you've been talking about this one tool called a balanced scorecard. So when I first heard about it, I looked it up online, and I did an image search to see how exactly this balanced scorecard was supposed to look. And I think it's a really powerful tool, but I think that it can get very complicated. Matter of fact, let me just read you a definition of a balanced scorecard. It says, the new balanced scorecard transforms an organization's strategic plan from an attractive, but passive document into the marching orders for the organization on a daily basis. It provides a framework that not only provides performance measurements, but helps planners identify what should be done and measured. It enables executives to truly execute their strategies. So when I looked this up online, it seems like that this was a tool that's been hijacked over the years and is something that is very, very complicated. But I know you have a very different take on that.
Well, so let me just explain to you, for those of you that may not be familiar with the balanced scorecard, like you said, Ray, that concept's been around a long time. And it is a very valuable tool for running your business. And in a typical balanced scorecard, you're kind of looking at these 4 key quadrants that are interrelated and kind of feed into one another. That's why it's called a balanced scorecard. And it does help you kind of look at key areas within your business so you can identify what needs your attention. And I've been a big fan, as you mentioned, of a balanced scorecard for a long time. And so what we did to really manage the desired outcomes for our clients is come up with a balanced scorecard for internet marketing. And so what I'd like to do is just cover those real quick, and then we'll kind of go into each one of these in a little bit more detail. But then actually we're going to plan the next 4 podcasts. We'll be covering each quadrant of our balanced scorecard, so stay tuned for that. But the 4 quadrants are the 4 Ps. The first quadrant of the balanced scorecard is the purpose quadrant, where you want to measure and manage what is the purpose of your website and how are you doing as it relates to the purpose of the website. So are you achieving that macro objective that we talked about in our last week's podcast? The second quadrant is the profit quadrant, and this is where we're going to measure metrics around profit and production of leads and production of sales at the right dollar amount. And that kind of gets into those micro key performance indicators we talked about last week. And then the third quadrant is the people quadrant. So this is the quadrant where we want to measure activity, that humans are interacting with us somehow, some way inside the internet, inside our website, etc. And then the fourth quadrant is production. Are we producing the things that we planned on producing to help us really achieve our objective?
Well, going back to Kauhik and tied into what you said in just an editorial comment, this 4 Ps, this balanced scorecard that you've come up with, this now makes a lot of sense, because when I first looked it up on the internet, I said, no way. I'm a business executive. I got a huge organization or a small organization, but I got a lot of things that I need to cover. I need to look one place to see how healthy my business is. So starting with the purpose, this is where you would state your mission statement, or this is your mission statement for your online activities, correct?
Yeah, basically, going back to what we talked about last week, if you're going to be successful online, you've got to putting on a quota, and in order to put internet marketing on a quota, we have to have a macro goal and we have to have micro key performance indicators. And so what goes in the purpose quadrant of your balanced scorecard really is an understanding of the purpose of your website and how you're going to measure that macro objective. And so last week we used the example of, your business wants to grow by $1 million in net new revenue over a 12-month period of time, and you wanted the internet to generate about 10% of that, or $100,000. And so what you would put in that first quadrant, the purpose quadrant, in this example, would be $100,000. But more specifically, Ray, what you would do is break that down by quarter. So what is my Q1 contribution towards that $100,000 goal? What's my Q2 contribution going to be? And it might be as simply as just simply $25,000 for each quarter. Maybe you're going to ramp it up, and Q4 is going to have more of a contribution than Q1. So maybe you have 5,000 or 10,000 in Q1, 20,000 in Q2, etc. But for argument's sake, just for today, let's pretend like each of our goals for each quarter is just taking that $100,000, dividing it by 4, so $25,000 each quarter. So very easy for you to understand as that business owner, am I achieving my objective, my internet marketing objective, simply looking at your numbers at the end of the quarter and saying, is there $25,000 in net revenue contributed by the internet or not, and now you know whether or not you've hit that objective.
Well, I like that you used the word macro objective, because we talked about macro and micro objectives there. So the purpose quadrant is where I'm going to find my macro objective, and I'm going to put that out, and that is Do you propose then that everybody on your team knows what that macro objective is?
Yeah, quite frankly, everybody on your team needs to know each of the quadrants and what the goals are or KPIs are for each of the quadrants. But absolutely, you want to share that with everybody.
You know, it sounds so 1960s-ish that you would not let your employees know what the goals are or what the metrics are. In this day and age, especially with transparency, in team building and advanced management techniques, I think it's important that there's transparency and everybody knows which way that the team is rowing. Correct?
That's absolutely correct.
So on the next quadrant, we're going to talk about profits. And I guess this is where we're going to have more of the micro objectives.
Yeah, this is absolutely where some of the key macro or micro rather key performance indicators come into play. So the first P, if you remember, that's the purpose quadrant where our macro objective lives. The second quadrant, and kind of working, from left to right here, is the profit quadrant. So this is where we're wanting to make sure that not only are we hitting our revenue goal, but we're hitting our revenue goal in a way that's profitable for the business. Because Ray, you're an entrepreneur like I am. Generating $100,000 in a year sounds great unless it costs you $200,000 to produce it, right?
Yeah. Been there. Well, yeah. I don't want to say done that. I actually was doing that until you came along in 2003 and gave me some dose of reality there and told me that I was spending way too much for my sales.
In certain ones, I remember, for example, you had those really cool simple human trash cans that you were selling for about $100 a piece, but we looked at the metrics and it looked like you were paying about $150 to make a $100 sale. Do you remember that?
I remember that very distinctly. It hurt. Yeah, it was my introduction to you was a splash of reality. It was like cold water, but you set us straight. Yeah.
Well, so that's exactly where we're getting. We're getting into these the profit goals, and so what makes up the profit goal would be CLV. You wrote a great blog this week about CLV, Ray, and understanding the customer lifetime value. And this is where you're going to understand how long a customer stays with you, and so you want to be measuring that. Are there any changes in that? What you're seeing, has your lifetime value gotten smaller? Because that's critical. Because if your lifetime value has gone from 3 years to 6 months, that's going to change your profit and everything else. And so you need to constantly monitor the lifetime value and the margins that you're making with your average customer. And then getting more macro here, or micro rather, we get into the CPA component, cost per acquisition. Again, you talked about that in your blog this week. But what did we spend over the quarter, and how many sales did we make? And then when I divide those numbers together, did I achieve my cost per acquisition target? And the same with cost per lead. So how much did I spend in the quarter? How many leads did I produce? And did I generate leads at the right cost per lead? And so those are the big ones. Has anything changed to my customer lifetime value? Or am I hitting my goals there? Am I hitting my goals with cost per acquisition and spend? And am I hitting my goals with cost per lead and spend as well? So those are the things that make up that second quadrant, the profit quadrant.
Well, as I get older, that simple human example, it kind of ties back to why I wrote that blog on customer lifetime value. I told you that I want to continue to learn, and I just didn't feel that strong about my understanding of customer lifetime value. So what do? I dig in and do the research and write. So now we're going to talk about people. I'm not sure exactly how this fits in on the quad. I mean, I understand. So the profit, we've got our macro objective. We've got a profit which shows us by metrics if we're getting close to our goal. How does people figure in this?
Well, great question, Ray. And remember, the whole idea about having a balanced scorecard isn't just to create a lot of work for us or to create a lot of work for our clients to understand what we're doing or to prove our value. It truly is designed for all of us to work together as a team and to be able to manage by exception and only focus our mental energy on things that aren't working so that we can continue to spiral our internet marketing initiatives in the right direction. And so the reason why we have to look at people is going to be potentially an indicator of where things aren't working. And so we have to have goals around how do human beings interact with us on the internet. And so inside of the people quadrant, you're going to have things like community growth. So how many new likes do you want? Or were you anticipating on your Facebook page? How many new followers were you expecting on your Twitter environment? Traffic, how many visitors came to your website during that period of time, and how does that relate to what you're expecting? How many came from search? How many came from paid search? These are all examples of things that might be in that people quadrant. Now, every business is different, so you have to design that people quadrant based on where you're focusing. If you're not focusing on Facebook, if that's not a channel for your business, maybe you're a B2B company and you don't think that that's where you need to be, then certainly you're not going to have a KPI around Facebook community growth, but maybe you're going to have something over on LinkedIn. And so you need to understand what are those people behavior things that we can measure. Again, community growth, traffic, engagement. Are people liking my blog, sharing my blog? Are people retweeting my tweets? These are all things that you can measure that are an indicator whether or not you're bringing in the right kind of buyer, and are they ultimately going to become leads or sales that are ultimately going to become revenue and profit for your business that shows that you're going to achieve your objective. And so that's kind of how the people quadrant comes into play. And if you think about it, you can't really have a balanced scorecard without an understanding of what are those people goals.
That makes a lot of sense now, and thanks for explaining that very clearly to this dense person sometimes. So the last quadrant is production. I assume then that to get those people and to hit those micro conversions, we're going to have to produce. Correct.
Right, absolutely. One thing, Ray, you say all the time, I say all the time, content is the fuel that makes the your internet marketing campaigns go. And so you can't have a great objective and you can't have good KPIs and goals as it relates to human behavior without producing something that you're going to publish out into the internet on a regular basis. And that's really what we're talking about from a production perspective. And this is, as you're in that strategic planning phase and you're building out your business plan for the next 12 months, you're going to come up with a game plan that says, hey, you know what? We need to be publishing a blog a week. We need to be doing a video a month. We need to be doing some long-form content once a quarter. Every business is different, but you need to come up with that game plan of producing useful, relevant, lead with value content that you're going to share with your community. And by sharing it with your community, that moves us quickly into the people quadrant. They're going to interact with that. They're going to come visit it, which is going to show traffic coming to your website. They're going to like it. They're going to share it. They're going to opt in for it. These are all examples of why production is important. And so if we've got our production goals in place that tie into our people goals, which tie into our lead, sales, and customer lifetime value goals, which ultimately ties into our objectives, now we're in a really good position to understand where are things falling short when they do fall short. Remember, Ray, last week we talked about that torpedo analogy about how torpedoes are really never on target. They're always heading in a direction, and they've got servos on board that kind of tell them when they need to shift course to the right or to the left, but they're deadly accurate, even though they're never really on target. Well, the balanced scorecard really becomes kind of that servo for our internet marketing campaign. So every time we look at this together, we can go and say, hey, we didn't hit our objective this quarter, and why is that? Well, it was because our cost per acquisition was too high. Well, why was our cost per acquisition too high? Well, maybe it's because we spent a lot of money, but we didn't get the visitors to our site. Well, why didn't that happen? Well, maybe we didn't write in enough blogs or we didn't do enough videos. And so you can start to see how it all starts to come together. It makes it really easy to go and reverse engineer and fix those things that aren't working.
Well, when we first started talking about this a couple weeks ago, you gave me 3 purposes that the balanced scorecard does. It allows you to do course correction, allows you to management by exception, and as you said in the very beginning of this talk, we can go quarter by quarter, set quarterly goals, and manage from there. Do I have a pretty good understanding of this now?
Yeah, absolutely, Ray. And so, I'm glad you brought up the quarterly thing too, because these balanced scorecards are really important, and we do get pretty myopic with them. And that's why I don't recommend, while you want to measure all this, you probably don't want to have a balanced scorecard meeting but once a quarter. In between those quarterly meetings, you do want to get monthly updates, and certainly your team better be analyzing and looking at things on a daily and weekly basis. But I don't think you need to have a big balanced scorecard meeting every single month. I think in between those things, you want to look at some key performance indicators, certainly around where you're spending money. For example, if you're doing Google AdWords or Facebook ads, you want to see, am I spending according to my goals? If my budget is $5,000 a month, am I spending $5,000 a month? Am I getting the traffic that I was expecting? How many leads or sales did I make for the month? But don't go in and try to fix or course correct in these big ways that a balanced scorecard is going to help you do, but maybe once a quarter.
Well, Paul, is there anything else you'd like to add on the balanced scorecard? I think we hit it pretty well.
Yeah, I do think that one of the key things that everybody needs to understand as we just kind of wrap this up is going and jumping into the deep waters of internet marketing is really important. I think every business needs to be in internet marketing. I don't care whether you're a B2B company or a B2C company, but really one of the key goals, why we call this podcast series Winning Online, is that we want you to win. And you can participate in tactics, and a lot of people are going to try to put shiny tactics in front of you and try to get you to invest in the next big thing. But one thing that we really want to do and impart with you in this series is that we're going to focus on, how do tactics follow strategy, and then how do you overlay measurement and key metrics that matter, just like the topic of today's webinar, so that you can make those course corrections and ultimately get to winning. Because, Ray, quite frankly, there's too many companies out there today that are spending lots of money online and they're not getting the results that they really need to generate.
Well, thanks, Paul. And so, everybody, we'd just like to thank you for joining us this week. Next week, we're going to talk about the purpose quadrant. We'll talk about mission statements. We'll talk about how to craft some goals. And as Paul said, we want to win. We want to win for you. So thanks for joining us, and you'll also hear Paul make fun of me and my weathering. Take care.